Well, Coach, I always say my coach. I've had a lot of coaches in my life, and man, just super grateful for my coach, Brian Smith. So super grateful to have you on here. Thanks for joining us. Really, we just want to, man, just talk about leadership, faith, life, and just really encourage the wrestling community. So I appreciate you hopping on here. You were a huge part of my wrestling career and life even now, as a close mentor and friend now. So appreciate you being on, Coach.
Well, excited. Always fun to hang out with you, Mark. You see my new office background, so you're in there. I got just had that put up. So every time I walk into the office, I see some successful people on my wall.
Yes, you had it put up right in time for this little interview, so we can put this on Facebook. And well, no, I'll just jump right in, and we'll kind of jump around a little bit here. But
Okay.
man, like when I think about you, and I was just talking to some other people in our ministry in FCA, and I've been talking to a lot of different coaches around the country, and I was telling them, I was like, man, when I talk to Coach Smith, it's just like he's so optimistic. He's been doing it for so long, so consistent for so long, and I was thinking about what it is that makes that happen, and I was thinking about just your tone, your optimism, your excitement to recruit the next kid, your excitement about the new pictures you have up in your locker room, the excitement about your individual drills you're about to go do with guys, and how well they're listening and paying attention and learning. And you were telling me again about, I mean, you talk about Tiger Style nonstop. And I was just telling these other friends of mine, just, man, there's just something different about the way the way he lives his life, and why he's able to do something for so long at such a high level. There has to be some sort of correlation. So talk about that a little bit. What is it that just keeps you going, and how are you able to be so excited every day?
Yeah, I guess I wrote some notes down, and I thought, Tiger Style, and people are always like, what the heck is it? But it's basically our core values of our program. And when you have and it's really of my life, and it's stuff that I learned from the past and through books and through my dad and through so many things, that I put it together finally. But it's believe, compete, one more, expect to win. And everybody's like, okay, what is that? It's these things, these pillars that when we teach, and we're constant, it starts with the recruiting process. It's knowing your identity. That's our identity. Our team knew its identity, and that it started with belief. And if you believe in something, and sometimes it's like in Christianity, you believe that if you're going to live a certain life in a certain way, Christ-like, that you're going to get to heaven. That's the simplest thing we're taught as young children and all through life. That it's the same thing here, that Tiger Style, there's this belief that if you live this certain way and think this certain way, act this certain way, good things are going to happen. It doesn't always mean you're going to win the NCAA title like you did and some others did, but you're going to have a really great career. You're going to have a great life. You're going to have a mindset that's going to help you to succeed in everything you do. And that's what I always say. Tiger Style guides behavior. And you look at our society now, we need better guiding of behavior, and that's what our program, it's been successful because we know our identity, and that's important. Everyone knows. And I was thinking of, when you think of when a city or a country gets the Olympic Games, here's a way to think of it. When the Olympics come to LA, what's LA going to be doing? I don't know if it's in 4 years or 8 years, but the city gets excited. The country gets excited. There's a focus. There's a belief that, man, the world's coming here. We have to clean up our city. We got to take pride. This is everyday things that should go on, but this is what really goes on. The whole city, the country gets behind it. There's businesses say, we got to invest in our athletes and our facilities. We got to do this because we want to win. And there's this belief that
It's
if
true.
we're going to host this, we're going to do it first rate. And you saw it happen when it was over in Japan. You saw it happen when it was in Great Britain, on just how the country gets behind it and all the people come together. They're wearing their shirts of their country and there's a
Yep.
pride. And that's kind of what Tiger Style is. You got to have this identity that you believe in and you're going to live it and you're going to
Yep.
compete at it and all those things. So that's really I think, where it comes from me, where I get that excitement, because I'm recruiting kids that believe in Tiger Style and want to live that lifestyle. And
It's good.
so I think of like when a kid gets in trouble, and you were probably in trouble once or twice, or things weren't going right. And I would
Right.
say, just to go back, the first thing you go back to your core values. Are you living Tiger Style? So if a kid's sitting across over here in the chair and he comes in and he sits down, I don't say, you got in a fight, or you were, maybe whatever it may be that he got in trouble with. I'll say, were you living Tiger Style? And
Yeah.
you know the answer. It's like, no, I wasn't. I'm getting lost. But one of the things I was taught growing up, and I had a great mentor, a great father, was my dad. And he would always say, when things, whether it was in trouble or struggling or a life decision was coming up, have you prayed on it? And prayer has always been, for me, an important thing that I pray on a lot of important decisions on life. Just, man, I hope this young man, can figure it out. So I'm praying for him and whatever it may be. But prayer was and always is important to me. And that was taught to me by my dad. And
Yep.
so, no, I think the other thing with it, when you talk identity, is a lot of people try to focus on like there's a defining the problem. It's more important probably to find the solution then, right? And sometimes we get stuck in our ways and we're, here's the problem. We got to beat Oklahoma State, or here's the problem. And we focus so much on that, on the big thing, instead of just, let's find a simple solution. And that's when I first got here. It was, man, we're probably not going to beat Oklahoma State right now.
Right.
But we can do other things. We can get kids to go to class. These are finding solutions, and it makes people better. Go to class. We got kids graduating, doing the right things. We can have guys not cutting corners, taking the stairs, all those little things.
It's good.
And then as little things start to turn into big things, then they start to believe in the bigger picture and it starts to happen. So I think that's, too many times people get caught up at I read a lot of books and that, but I was reading the story about Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling's or whatever, how she couldn't get the book published. She was basically a single mother and had a child, and was writing these books. And here she is, she's going to publisher after publisher. And like, this is a crazy story. Why would anybody want to read this? Finally, one of the publishers, I don't know how many she sent it to, leaves it at his house, and his daughter, or son, I think it's his daughter, ends up reading it. And she's like blown away by this. She's not a publisher. She doesn't know she doesn't know the problem that they were looking at it, that nobody's going to understand it. Here's a child that was like 8 years old, reads it and is blown away and says, Dad, I want more of this. And of course, the publisher says, let's go with this. Next thing you know, she's written so many stories. They've been in the movies now. But so many times people look at it the wrong way, or the wrong people are looking at it. And so that's an important thing, that you can't get caught in a box too. I've had that happen sometimes in my career, where you kind of get, hey, Tiger Style is this way and it can't be. But no, you're going to have a lot of differences, and you're going to have a lot of things that you got to grow from and learn from. And that's part of it, that you have to continue to grow.
Oh, that's really good. So leadership right now, I feel like, you're one of the great leaders that I know of, that I think of, not only in the sport of wrestling, but just in my life, as I've been around a lot of good leaders and super grateful. And there's things you can learn from each one, and there's so many different leadership styles. But I've also realized, man, the more everybody wants to be a leader, but it's like, man, the responsibility, accountability, just it all goes up. But what I admire about you is you've taken myself and, me, all these different athletes. I wasn't the top recruit, but you were able to lead me and get me to believe and buy in and maximize my potential. then you take other kids at a different, that are the top recruit in the country, and then you're able to get them to buy in and
Yeah.
reach their maximum potential. I just feel like that's unique, and you don't see that, where you're able to take all different backgrounds, all different styles. And I'm learning not everybody can be led the exact same way. And you've talked about that a little bit before.
Yeah.
But talk about that now. How are you able to get the
Well,
most out of people and
yeah.
lead them different styles?
Well, first of all, when you think of Mother Teresa, I think there was a quote. I'm not going to quote her perfect, but I think she said your character of your, is going to be based on how you treat the people that have nothing to do to make you successful. So she was treating people with, that were diseased and laying in the streets of India, and she took care of them while they had a couple of weeks to live, and that was her life. But she treated them with the utmost, and that's why she became a saint, because she treated everybody with the utmost respect and loved them and cared for them. And so when I have had to teach this to young coaches, and I've had to learn from this, that anybody that is in our room is a part of our success. And from the trainer to the fourth string guy, to the first string guy, to the assistant coaches, to our academic advisor, everybody is a part of Tiger Style and contributes. And the relationship that I want to have with all of them, that is, together we can do great things. And you have to, I really believe, to be a great leader, you have to have a very, I mean, my ego is I could care less if I get any of this success. Honestly, I want these kids to be on posters. I want them to, if they sign NIL stuff and make money, that would be great, because they're having success. I just enjoy it, and I want them to have that, and I want them to have a great experience. And that comes from developing relationships that I've had to learn as a coach, that people are not going to just come in and run through a wall for you. They're going to want to know, why does coach want me to do this? And and I understand coach, man, he told me this about his life, and he's asked me about my life and where I came from. And this relationship starts to evolve. And I it's knowing, my dad taught me this. I got in trouble in 5th grade a lot. I was going through a time period, and every kid, a lot of kids go through this. And I was really had a lot of energy, and got thrown out of, I forget what it was, Sister Mary Catherine's classroom or whatever it is. And I got thrown out of English class and got sent downstairs to the convent in the basement. I was sitting there by myself, thrown out of class. And my dad was the AD football coach of these schools. And I'm like, I had to go home and say, I'm thrown out of English class. I think I'm going to fail it because I can't go to class. I was, a wise ass and all this stuff and acting up. So she threw me out. So my dad met with the teacher, the nun, and sister's like, I don't want Brian in the classroom. He's like, well, let's keep him out for another week, but let's try to, instead of let's find a different way to solve this problem. If he's going to be in the basement, let's have him read something. And I hated to read, hated English. My dad, through sport, said, let's have him read Sports Illustrated articles and, write up summaries of the stories. So of course, I didn't have a choice on this, so I knew I better do it so I could get out of the convent, because I missed my buddies. So all of a sudden I started reading Sports Illustrated, and next thing I know, I'm writing these, little, mock-ups. What do you call about them? The summaries of them. And next thing I know, I'm writing all these things and reading. I think I had a subscription to Sports Illustrated forever. And now I read a book like every week, and I'm reading, and my team's reading. We have a library over here. And that was an influence on my life, where instead of focus on this kid's a troubled kid, let's just give up on him. My dad came up with a solution. Next thing I know, I went back to the English class. I'm not acting up. I'm into reading and know the importance of it. And my dad taught me that through a lesson of, still I was in trouble, but I learned that. And that's some of the things you have to do as a leader. Is it's not always going to be the same way you're going to deal with people. Everybody comes from different backgrounds. And so I have some kids that come from wealthy families, and it's been easy, but they have to learn to deal with adversity, and it's going to be tough. Where I'll have a poor kid that, is in a home, maybe an apartment with the guys with a lot of money, and he's afraid because he doesn't know how he's going to do this, because he doesn't know where his next meal is going to come from, or how he's going to make it through school and all the loans and the stress. And
Yeah.
shoot, it's difficult. So I need to know that. And that's one of the things we do. I'll ask my assistants to say, when you do your individual drill, sit down and talk with the kid and find out something about his life and
Wow.
who impacted him, who's, what teacher had impact on him, and start finding things out about that kid, because they'll enjoy and you'll find out things, and that maybe it's going to be that trigger that, man, I'm not breaking through this kid. He's not figuring it out. Where you start to figure the kid out, you'll start to figure out the wrestling, and it
Good.
all takes care of itself. So I have a million of those stories, but with my dad and what he taught me, but it's, and you read through, and it's a lot of the times you learn through stories. So I tell,
Yeah.
Coach Smith's story time
Oh
is
yeah.
a fun time for Mizzou wrestling when I come up and
Oh
I'll
yeah.
start telling stories. But when you think of Christ, Jesus,
Yeah.
the whole Bible is stories. And
Yeah.
when the apostles are writing this, the Bible, it's
Yeah.
stories that Jesus, and these stories are to teach. And they are amazing when you think about it. It was, some of the stories still today, people cannot, kids learn from those stories, and it guides behavior. And so that's why I'm constantly telling stories about you or Ben or Jaden or Joey Garrity when he got hurt his knee, and how that destroyed him in his senior year. But then he ended up hanging out with Bus Tarbox, and the next thing he knows, he got interested and turned a really negative part of his life into a positive, and he's a doctor now.
Yeah.
And how that happens. So kids,
Uh,
that's, to be a great leader, you've got to be a great storyteller. So when I run into great leaders, a lot of them read books. So
yeah.
I always recommend to people, if you want to be a great leader, read, because you want to discover what other ideas and other things that you can bring to your organization, and stories that'll help guide behavior in the way you want it, but in a different way. So that's so important.
My yeah, no, my 6-year-old, she keeps telling me now, she's learning to read, and I'm telling her, my dad always told me, I always remember waking up and my dad reading in the mornings, and he would always, and I didn't like to read either. And now, I'm reading books nonstop. And as I think of all the great leaders that I've been around, they were all, readers. And I tell her, my dad always told me, readers are leaders and leaders are readers. And it's kind of what you're saying. And so now Eleanor is
Without a
going
doubt.
around she's saying, she's telling my wife, Daddy says that I need to read because readers are leaders and leaders are readers. And but anyways, I do remember you on all our trips reading books all the
Yeah.
time, and it made me think. I just feel like you're always studying, a student, you're learning. And so many people in wrestling, I feel like they're so focused on only wrestling, and
Yeah.
it's like they only look within our sport. But I always noticed you love baseball, you love football, or you like all these other sports. You read business books, you study other business leaders, and so I always think of you as like you look at the big whole picture and you learn from all of this.
Yeah.
And you use it in wrestling and coaching wrestling. Why is that important? And how do you think that's affected your career, that your father was a football coach and an athletic director, and that, that you're interested in business stuff, and how does that affect your coaching?
Well, he was also a history teacher.
Yeah.
So I love history. So like during COVID this time, and when you break down history, what is history? We're learning about the past.
Yeah.
And if you learn from the past, you can maybe make it better and learn about why things are today. A lot of things that are happening in whether it's our economy or our laws, or there's a reason to it from the past. And even with wrestling, why are things happening today that are, why did they change these rules, and why did they do this, and why is the sport evolved to this? And you learn from it. And I became a history teacher. I taught history for a couple of years. So I love history. You learn so much from learning about your past. During COVID, I started reading books on Truman. Why? Because I live in the state of Missouri. Truman grew up in Independence, Missouri, in Kansas City area. And it's like, man, this is a president. He was actually a president almost 2 full terms because of, FDR dying and all that, and how he was not a popular guy, and he took over the job, and what he had to go through, and the adversity, and how he dealt with it. And so you can learn from that. I've learned from my brother, who was an athlete, but now he's a CEO of a company, and he views things through like, man, and when you're a CEO of a company, you're viewing it, if this isn't working, we're going to lose money. And he'll call me sometimes. He'll be like, hey, I'm watching, and this isn't a true story, but he would say, I would watching Mark Ellis, and he's diving in on low singles, and you'll probably smile because you probably did do that, and I yell at you early. But if he would stop doing that and do this, I'm just watching. He did it 10 times and scored once and got scored on 8 times, and he's thinking in business model wise. So that's, I'll look at that. I'm like, okay, I'm glad you brought that to me, instead of, hey, you worry about your job, I'll think of mine.
Right.
I will listen to him. He's bringing an outside perspective. And that outside perspective is like that 8-year-old kid reading that book, that, Dad, this is really good. You don't know what you're talking about. That a business person can come in and give you some perspective, what they're thinking in business, because this is ultimately, everything is a business. And ultimately they're going to give you some ideas. And I love to read about Wooden. You know, I've read about different football coaches, Coach K in basketball, the leadership on not only how he had to deal with coaching Duke, but how he had to coach the elite coaching the dream teams and how that affected him. Shoot, I was watching something when we talk about leadership and how you have to treat, athletes differently, how his first meeting as an assistant coach for the dream team, I brought this immediately to my coaches, was the head coach of the Pistons at the time. I'm drawing a blank on his name. Sat him down. He thought he was going to give him X's and O's. And he's like, sometimes you need to forget and just let things go. And he's like, you're going to make things bigger. And he goes, college coaches like to make things into big problems. If a kid's a little bit late for practice or this, he goes, these guys are the best in the world. Let's get them on the court and get the most out of them that we can, and let the little problems, just forget about that and focus on what we can. And he's like, I had all my notebook and I was ready to write all this stuff, but he didn't. He's like, man, I never thought of, I got to just get these guys to the, the gold medal, and how are we going to focus on that instead of all these other little problems. And so simple advice from some, but that's the point. When I'm watching things, learning things, I was not a great speaker when I first started coaching at Missouri. I was, refining skills and getting better. But I remember giving a talk at the High School Coaches Association, and the guy hands me a book. The MC hands me a book after I gave this like 20-minute talk. It was on how to give better speeches. So I think I got the message that, man, okay, so what did I do? Back then it was VCR tapes. I had to get better at becoming a leader and giving my ideas out and teaching about Tiger style and visions and stories. So I started watching film of Lou Holtz speaking to businesses. And why do businesses have coaches come in and speak to them? Because they can talk about how to lead people to a vision and turn that vision into success. So businesses have the same thing. So here I am giving it in the reverse. That, I just spoke to shelter insurance. What do I know about insurance? Nothing. But I know about vision, about getting people to believe and working together on how to sell. I have to sell to 18-year-olds. I have to sell people on, here's why you need this insurance and why it's important. And the importance of it. And then, of course, developing that relationship, that how do we become a better company, giving one more. So things like that.
It's really good. You always knew you wanted to be a coach. You've told me a lot. You've told a lot of people that. I think a big part of it, you say, was your father.
Yes,
as a coach. I guess talk about that a little bit. But you also told me that he took you to an FCA camp when you were younger, and I actually saw a picture of the trophy from that FCA camp. And talk about that experience. Just, years and years ago with FCA, and then also just your knowing you always wanted to coach.
It was just, my dad was coaching at Catholic Central, which was a Catholic school. I grew up in the Catholic schools, and I've been going to the Newman Center on campus here for 24 years. So I'm working the same job, the same wife, the same church. I'm a pretty boring guy. And at 4 years old, Coach Smith knew he wanted to be a coach. Little Brian knew he wanted to be a coach. It's just, some people say it's a calling. Obviously, my dad had huge, because he was coaching. It had an impact on me, but I loved it. I would sit at 5 and 6 years old and watch film being broken down on a football game, and watch the same play 11 times, because he'd be grading each kid. And I thought that was awesome. Other kids were outside playing, and I'm in the basement with a projector and my dad helping him break down film. He's like, watch the guard and see which foot steps first. And I'm breaking that down. That training actually taught me about the discipline of coaching, that there's so many other things outside of the practice room, of breaking down film, of having the team over the house. We would have the team over the house every Thursday night. And it was the coolest thing. All these kids would drive up in a car, and all the kids would come in and talk to me and hang out with me. I traveled with the team, and I'd see how my dad would deal with kids. If they were in trouble over the summer, we'd get these phone calls every night, making sure they were in at 10 o'clock, and just how it was more than just coaching X's and O's. But he also took the team to an FCA camp. And I remember we went for like 3 days. It was a sleepover camp, and it was definitely impact. It was an impactful camp to me because it started every day with a prayer. We were reading through the Bible and talking about scripture. And, and I'm thinking, I'm around like it was like 500 kids at this college campus. And I'm thinking, these are all football players and other athletes. I think it was mostly football. And I'm thinking, look at this, that my dad thought this was just as important as practicing, that we're talking about God. And as a young kid, that was in 1972. So I was 7 years old when I got to be the manager for the team and go there. And it had an impact on me. And so when I was asked to be involved with you in FCA, and it's just like, but we've had it here. We've been fortunate here to have Bus as a part of our, our team doc, and Bus runs a leadership Bible study at his house, and Coach Maple, one of my assistants, is doing it, and Ty is involved in all this stuff. And that's important to me, that my assistant coaches want to live a certain lifestyle. Tiger style follows Christianity, that we're going to live a right life. We're going to compete. Jesus competed at life. He wanted people to live up to a standard and see things and live for, treat people the right way. And then of course, give more. How do you give more? And so all that stuff came from, my dad and other people that were impactful in my life, that's so important, that he lived it. He definitely lived it. And, he passed away this past spring, and it was difficult on me, but I also know that he's always with me. My dad taught me so much, but like I told you, I still know, I remember struggling as a wrestler, struggling with what jobs to do, in our jobs. And when I was losing at Missouri those first couple of years, and then dealing with problems and maybe having to dismiss a kid, or how we're going to deal with budget problems. Have you prayed on it? And that's today, when a kid's sitting in that chair, I ask the kid the same thing. Do you have a higher faith? Do you pray on it? You should pray, because I think it's helpful. So that's my dad having that impact. That how can I do that now? When you talked about, I think one of your questions you sent me earlier was like, how do you want to be remembered? Man, I just want to be remembered that my athletes will say, Coach Smith, man, he talked a lot about this Tiger style, but he also lived it. And he was a good example of how to live it. And and how he treated his family, how he treated his, how he gave to the university, and how he gave to us and impacted us. That's what I'd be happy if a wrestler comes back to me and says, man, Coach, you had a good, such a positive impact on my life. Not wrestling, but life. Right. Wrestling for sure, but life is more important than wrestling. So that's what I'd want of that. I lived it.
And that was my last question. I mean, is that when you think of just even your wife, your children, your former wrestlers, that's what you want them to say about you? When you're
hope I live, and hopefully somehow I can impact them enough that they're telling some crazy story of, Coach Smith gave us a puppy story, or Coach Smith, I remember this story or that story, and they're using it, and they think of me through that. That's when you were a good leader, that they're using some of the stuff that you did to impact and guide behavior in the right way. That it may be in business, or it may be in the, when Michael Chandler calls me and says, Coach, I'm living it. I'm doing this and that. And even though he's in the fight industry, he's still a father and a husband and all those things. And so that's, I think, as a leader, I know that as me as a leader, what I want to happen, I want people to say, Coach Smith lived it. And because of it, he impacted me, that I'm trying to live it too.
No, that's really good. Man, coach, I won't keep you any longer. I appreciate your time a ton. I mean, that's super encouraging. And again, just thank you for being with us. And I'm sure we'll have you back on here soon.
It's always fun, Mark. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Thanks, coach.